Good evening, everyone. Good evening. We are almost at the end of this year. Can you imagine? It's 2022. We have one more day, one more day. Listen, I am Portia Wheatley. I am the founder and the president of a nonprofit organization acknowledged as Trophy of Life Incorporated, where we have the great opportunity, the privilege, and the honor to render hope and encouragement to individuals across the country. And I don't take that lightly, and I really believe it is a God assignment to do that. All types of people, all cultures, all colors, it doesn't matter, the world, because we all need some type of hope and encouragement. Well, before we go a little farther in our programming, I am going to ask if you would go to our YouTube channel and subscribe. You allow us to help spread hope and encouragement. You become a part of our team. So wherever this message goes that we have on tonight, and we have a good one for you tonight. All the others are good too, but this one is good too. So we want you to be a part of our team, to be able to share this word across the country, to let people know there is hope. There is hope for them. Those individuals that feel like there is no hope, we come to tell you tonight, there is hope. Well, today I have, matter of fact, let me back up for a minute. Did I say good afternoon or did I say good evening? Because usually I'm on in the afternoon, but just in case I didn't, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Well, this evening, I have a special guest with me. I just met her, but it seems like we connected, and I know her aunt. Yeah. Shout out to Kimberly Young. Shout out to Kimberly, one of our forever friends. And it's amazing how we met, and we're still friends on today. Well, I am going to introduce to you Sarah. Don't tell me Sarah, because I've been trying to practice your name. Kasulke.
Yes.
Did I get it? Good. Well, I'm gonna call you Sarah. All right.
Yeah.
But what we wanted to know tonight, are you ready for hope and encouragement? That's what we want to know, because we're definitely going to share that with you. We're going to share that with you. I want the world to know that in spite of whatever you go through in your life, dark places, low places, trauma, there is still hope. Don't give up on life. Please don't give up on life. And we that have not experienced it, but we may have that type of experience in our families, in the community, on our job, or wherever. We have to be responsible enough to let someone know there is hope. Well, Sarah, I am going to allow you to share, give you the platform for a moment, and I'll come back with some questions and conversation. But tell us how the your life experience began with substance abuse.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, first of all, thanks for having me. I love the idea of this broadcast, and I'm honored. But, for me personally, my journey as an addict and my battle with substance abuse, it started really, really young. And I was raised in like the normal household. Like I didn't want for nothing. Like we were so blessed growing up, and it just goes to show you that it's just doesn't always have to do with your environment. Like sometimes it really is something in you that like makes you feel a certain way. And so really, this started at a young age, probably before I even graduated from high school. And, I ended up going to college, like following the path that everyone had aligned for me. And, there were some things that happened while I was away at college, and I ended up leaving without even taking my finals. So basically failed out. And when I got back, everything progressed. I wasn't even 21 yet. I was a full-blown alcoholic at that point, and I progressed into heavier drugs. And, I was a mess. At that point, I was still able to like hold a job and do like some normal things. And I ended up in like a very dark place. I got very sick physically. which, from IV drug use, which led me to a rehab center. And so I was almost 22. I celebrated my 22nd birthday about a week after I got out of this rehab facility. And so I was still young, and this facility introduced me to like 12-step programs. It introduced me to a lot of like the psychiatric side of substance abuse, which I had been in counseling in high school, but I don't think I had a very deep understanding of like how deep my issues went. And it was the first time that I got consistent, like one-on-one care with a psychiatrist. And I went from there into Halfway. I lived in Halfway for about a year. And like they say, like, that's when the real work begins, right? Like the rehab facility flushes your system and it gets your body like physically clean and sober. But it's up to you from that point forward. And so I lived in Halfway for a while, and I really, I think I really, for how old I was, I did the best I could, truthfully. And so many great things happened in that time. I had a fabulous support system full of people who were clean and sober, people who were working the program, people who were like me, young people, old people, like every type of person that you can imagine. The disease of addiction does not discriminate. I have found that the most help I have ever gotten have always come from people that I didn't think it would come from, like people that didn't look like me or sound like me or come from where I came from. And so in that time period, I met my husband, and, and at this point, things kind of changed. I started to go through like normal life events, like painful life events. And although I had been doing the work to stay clean, I don't think I had been doing the work to stay clean and handle everything that could be thrown in my direction. And like my husband, when I met him, his mother was sick and she ended up passing away, which was a very like long, deep grieving process for him. I was a part of that. It's difficult to grieve the loss of a loved one, and it's especially a parent. And so a couple months after that, my husband, who's also a recovering addict, and he did say it was okay for me to say that, he was actually speaking at an event, and his sister called his phone like 40 times. So while he's up there speaking at this event, he answers the phone, and it's his sister, and she's saying, "Dad is dying. You need to come right now." So we did. So we left, we drove there. We were there for about an hour, and his dad passed away. And so it was like one after the other. And then couple months after that, we decided to take this like nice trip to Jamaica, which is something that recovery really afforded me. Like I was finally able to do these like really nice, fun things. And we didn't have any cell phone reception there. However, one phone call came through, and it was the hospital saying that his grandfather had passed. So we had these 3 deaths right in a row. It was a lot of grief. It was a lot of trauma. It was a lot of change for him. He went from being the primary caretaker to 3 adults to none of them. And we moved in together. And while this all was happening, we're still, sort of living our lives and, as recovering addicts. And I got into a situation where, we ended up getting engaged. We ended up buying our first home. Really great things were happening for us. And I ended up getting into a very big fight with my best friend. And the argument ended with me literally saying, like, "Go F yourself," not my finest hour. And she committed suicide a couple weeks after that. And it's still so hard to talk about.
It's okay. Take your time. Take your time.
So I had to live with that. She was going to be the maid of honor in my wedding. And that was the last thing I ever said to her. And And that was a lot. That was a lot for us to be grieving all of these things at once. And then our dog died. And this was
Mm,
like an 18-month period. We just suffered so much loss. And, um, it's crazy. Like, you can handle so much, like your body can handle and your mind can handle so much. And they say, like, the straw that broke the camel's back, right? Like, I thought I was okay. And then when the dog died, it was like, I lost it. And that led me into a very dark place, where I eventually relapsed. So I've got 4.5 years clean, right? And I decide to go back to using. I had also in that time been given a cervical cancer diagnosis. I was battling cervical cancer. I was being told I wasn't going to be able to have kids. And it was a lot. Like, it was a lot. And I wasn't prepared for that. I mean, I was barely 25, and like, I wasn't ready to hear those things. I thought I was just getting started. So I went back to using. I was afraid to tell anyone. I thought that if I was honest, that my husband wouldn't want to marry me anymore. And really, like, the disease was at work a long time before I knew it was. Like, when I did receive that cervical cancer diagnosis, I know that the right thing to do would be to tell the people I love so that they can support me. But like, something in that dark place inside of me told me, like, don't tell anyone, because if you ever want to take pain meds, you won't be held accountable. And that was what happened. Is like, I didn't have anyone to hold me accountable because a lot of people didn't know the situation that I was in. And that, the disease of addiction progresses very rapidly. And I went from, taking my pain meds as directed to going back to being an IV drug user within under a week. And so I get married while I'm using. Everyone, I'm still sponsoring women using. And everyone thinks that I'm still clean. And then about a week after we got married, my husband found out that I had relapsed. And that led me into a very, very dark place. I went from being an addict, like a using addict who could still like hold a job and function in public, to an addict that lives in abandoned homes in Baltimore City and spends most of my time in places with no power and no electric and a lot of cockroaches. And missing persons reports were filed. I would go missing for like months at a time. I was getting infections from being an IV drug user, and like, on my arms. And I, at that point, was like a carrier for MRSA, which MRSA is like a very serious staph infection sort of thing. And I just kept going. And like, I went to just about every state you could think of for treatment, right? Like, I flew to California, I was in Maryland, I was in Florida, like, and then I'd get back and then I'd disappear for a month and a half. And it was complete and utter chaos. And finally I found myself in the wrong place at the wrong time. And like, I am a firm believer that as human beings, we all suffer some type of trauma. Now, whether your trauma is like physical or emotional abuse or something that you've seen or something that has happened to you, we all go through something at some point that really changes like our brain chemistry and how we're wired. And that happened for me again. Like, I had already suffered a lot of like, like sexual trauma from the situations that I had put myself in, and physical trauma from abusive relationships, and emotional trauma from, abusive relationships that I kept putting myself in. And so I found myself in these places where like no one really should be, in the city, and again, witnessing more traumatic events. And what ended up happening is I was so shook from like the things that I had seen that I hold myself up in a hotel, like near the airport, for 2 weeks by myself, which is a very dangerous thing to do for an IV drug user. The fact that I made it out of that 2-week time period alive is that's like the good news, right? That's God clearly working in my life, because it is very dangerous. You know, I was around some pretty, you know, special characters, but if one thing was certain is that we were always prepared for an overdose to make sure that everybody survived. And so for me to suddenly go to a place where like I was by myself, it's scary. And when the money was gone and when the drugs were gone, I called my husband, and yet again, my cry for help. And he was like, this is it. This is the last time. I'm sending you away and you need to stay. Like, you need to stay there. Like, don't come back, you know? And so this is where the like real work began for me. They flew me down to Florida. I had MRSA covering my arm. I had gotten into a car accident and the airbag dust had gotten on my face, which was then infected with MRSA. And I still have scarring from this. And I can't even believe they let me on the plane, honestly, because I'm sure I was a sight to see and I was a total disaster. But they did. And so when I got there, they actually had me do a hospital detox because of, you know, of the infection. And I was so traumatized that like I slept in the corner of the room for like 3 weeks. Like I couldn't even sleep in the bed. And finally they sent me to another like inpatient rehab facility. And this one was a little bit different. This one was a very small, and it was, to be honest with you, it was the first time where I ever got I was connected with a therapist there. And for the first time, I was like, I'm just going to be like really honest with her. I've never done that before. I had, or at least in that year period during my relapse, I never had. And I almost thought it was like, I'm just going to be honest and like, I'm going to scare her away. Cause I just like thought, I was just, my experience was so awful. And it worked in my favor because it didn't scare her away. And we developed a very close connection. We are, I still have such a special place for her in my heart today. And so I was in that facility for 90 days, which is a pretty long time for an inpatient. And the fact that my insurance covered that again, yeah, I'm so grateful, but I was lucky enough to be someone that had insurance that could do that. I then went to Halfway again, and I lived in Halfway in Florida for about 3 months. And it was at that 6-month time period where like, it was getting to the point with my husband where it was like, either we're gonna fix this or we got to move on, and he was still in Maryland. So it was at that point that I returned to Maryland, and he had moved from like Millersville, Glen Burnie area over to the Eastern Shore. So that geographical relocation was certainly helpful for me to keep me like out of the city. Like a geographical relocation by itself will not keep you clean, but on the rough days, it certainly can help. And it was a lot. It was a lot to move back and to begin the process of like cleanup. And
let me ask you this, Sarah. During that time in your life, were you a violent person, or how were you?
I was. I was very violent, and I was actually like a diagnosed sociopath, and which is insane because if you know me clean, that is not who I am. And a lot of times with addiction, they'll talk about like Jekyll and Hyde, how people have 2 completely different personalities. And I am a very extreme case of that. It's like, as soon as I get a drink or a drug in me, all bets are off. I don't care who you are. I don't care where you are. I don't care what I'm doing. It is about getting the next drug. I don't care how I have to do it. And there was a lot of physical violence. Actually, I was arrested multiple times, and they are all violent offenses. Like,
wow.
It was a lot. I found myself in situations where I physically harmed myself, putting myself in those situations.
So one of the things I wanted to share with the audience is that you see Sarah here sharing. However, I would want you to listen to see how you may be of help to someone that you may see signs in, that may be going through the same experience, who wants to keep it quiet, who wants to not share the complete story, who wants to be a functioning addict,
Right. Right.
but they need help.
Yeah. And like for me, that relapse, I went straight from normal life to being a total dysfunctional person. But there are a lot of people out there who are functional addicts and who use that as an excuse to not get clean, because they're like, it's not affecting my life, it's not affecting my job. But the fact is, for me, it's not always about those things. Like it can be like a total and utter spiritual death. Like, just because you're still showing up for work and like physically showing up does not mean that you are okay. And
Right.
that's another thing that I had to like. The first step is always to get yourself right physically, but at that point you can begin to work on yourself spiritually and mentally. And sometimes that spiritual death, which is what I experienced before my relapse, is like I just had lost all hope. Like I was no longer connecting with God. I was no longer connecting with anyone. And
Mhm.
that was so like I would rather have to detox from drugs than have to go through those feelings that I felt in those last few months before I relapsed. And
Yes.
like the way my body and my addiction work is like I connect things like emotionally. Like, and when somebody makes me feel a certain way, that's like how my memories work.
Mhm.
And so when I am not feeding my spirit, I can get brought back to that place. And that's so scary to know that, like, while you might be okay on the outside, you're completely dying on the
Yes.
inside under this
Mhm.
total like false, you know, thing you've got going on there, and you're just like completely dead inside. And like you might physically be showing up for your family and your friends, but it's not the same as being fully present.
Being fully present.
Yeah.
That's good right there. We definitely need God to help us through just a regular life, let alone, when chaos comes into our lives, or someone else causes that chaos to be a part of our families. Now,
Yeah.
do you have any siblings, or did you have your mother there that she could see what was going
Yeah.
on with you?
So I have a brother, and my parents I'm like very, I love my family to death. We are all pretty close. And I also have a stepsister. And like I think that when I relapsed, I really distanced myself from them so that they weren't really capable of like really understanding what was going on.
Mhm.
Um and it and that is something that's different this time around. Like I think that if I were to do that now, the reaction would be a totally different one. And
Gotcha.
there were so many relationships that I built in those first like 4.5 years clean that I damaged when I relapsed. And one of the things that like I came out of that with is like, there is a difference between like letting somebody take advantage of you and like letting someone walk all over you, and showing up for someone who's like not capable of showing up for themselves. And
Mhm.
so like, for example, I missed two weddings, right? Two of my very best friends. And one of those girls, she's not capable of the forgiveness yet, which is okay, because some people, things affect people very differently. For some people, showing up for a wedding is everything, and for some people it's not. And so one of them I'm still very close with, and like one of them I'm not. And the girl that I am still very close with, what she taught me is like the true definition of unconditional love, regardless of like how other people treat you. But what it did for me was like, I suddenly realized that like I don't want to be the person that is like, if you're mean to me, I'm mean to you.
No,
I want to be
you
the
can't
person
live
like,
like that.
right. Like I don't want the way you treat me to dictate the type of person that I am. If you don't want to show up for me, that's fine. I will be there for you if you need me. And that, yeah,
One of
immense
the
respect.
things, excuse me, one of the things you stated and you shared with me, let me read this to you, and then I would like for you to elaborate on it because it's so important. You said finding the right path for yourself can mean walking a different path than the people you love. It can mean choosing the painful thing instead of the easy thing. Now that's a mouthful right there.
Yeah, it's a lot, and it's the truth. And a lot of, we outgrow people, and it's hard to say that. It's because it's hard to think that like the people who were my very best friends the first time I got clean like might not necessarily be in my life anymore. But that's a good thing, because everybody should be growing, and sometimes you're going to grow in different directions. And sometimes it's really hard to be like, look, these behaviors that I used to be okay with, I'm not okay with anymore. And while it would be really easy for me to sit here and co-sign everything that you're doing, it's toxic for me. And I'm going to make you mad, but I got to go this way.
Very good.
And, um,
And
and
now you're speaking about that as an experienced person who had a drug problem. I mean, just in everyday life, when you want to be a better person, you cannot always hang out with someone who's always nagging, complaining. You have to get away from that. That doesn't do you any good.
Yeah. And it's the same thing like with like one of my biggest problems when I got clean the second time around was like making the mistake of thinking that I needed to complete all of my goals from the first time around. But like our trauma, like that changes us, and the things that we go through change who we are. And like I no longer wanted to be the person that I wanted to be the first time around. And I had all of these plans, like go to college for like business administration and like all this stuff. And like I got clean the second time, and I was like, why? I don't even like that. Like that
Yes.
does not, that
And it
doesn't make
shows you
sense.
where you've grown. It shows you
Yes.
where you've grown. And
Right.
everyone who was in one season of your life may not be able to go with you to the next season. So
Right.
choose, you have to make that choice there. One of the things you said, addressing the pain that, addressing the pain that you've caused, knowing it might cause more pain, but you really do have to address the pain that you cause, knowing that it just might cause more pain. But in order to get to that healed place, you have to address it.
Yeah, that's the only way through it. So actually, I'm so glad you brought that up, because last night at 1 o'clock in the morning, I was on TikTok and I was scrolling through, and this guy popped up on my page, and he was talking about like the difference between like bison and buff. I can't even remember, but he was saying that like normal cows, when a storm comes, they just sit and wait for the storm to pass instead of running away from it, right? Because if you sit there, it'll pass over and then it'll be over. But buffalo run towards it, because if you're running at it and it's moving this way, you're going to get through it a heck of a lot faster.
Woo!
And I'm like, oh my goodness. Like,
so do I call you Buffalo?
Right. I'm like, that is the only way to address anything. And for me, part of that was like I had to find my voice, and I had to learn how to use it. I wasn't very good at that, like ever. And at this point, I'm sort of at a point where like sometimes I need to figure out when to shut up. I would rather ask for your forgiveness than your permission, but sometimes that can cause pain. However, for me, I need to address things head on. I am tired of being walked over. I am tired of not telling people how I feel, because when I don't, I keep it inside, and that brings me to a very dark place personally. And
so how long have you been clean?
So 5.5 years.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's, sometimes it's bittersweet to say that, because like really it should be almost 10. And
Mhm.
I will always have that mentality. However, I would rather have the 5.5 years that I've had of incredible growth than those 4 years that I had early on that were so like surface level. Like it wasn't, the work wasn't going all the way through. I was just doing what I needed to do to skate by, you know?
Let me share this, well, not share, but I would like to pose this to you. If you say, for instance, this is your platform, this is your stage, what would you share, and be considerate that this is the end of the year, pretty one more day, and people, they're like, I don't want to go into next year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they're turning to drugs, alcohol, they sexing themselves to death, doing
Yeah.
so many other things that are not good for them, good for their body, good for their mind, good for their person, good for their family. And I'm sure, you lose so much, your character, your personality, your physical condition, you lose so much.
Yeah.
But what would you say if you were speaking to an audience? You have two audiences, one of young people who feel like, let me just try it. And then on the opposite side of that is an audience of individuals who are abusing drugs. So you have the young people who's thinking about trying, and you have the other set of people who are already abusing it, because you are such a testimony to the fact that you're leaving dope and you're going to hope. Dope to hope. That's what that is. And
Yeah.
that's good news to look at you, and say, my God, we have a saying, you don't look like what you've been through. And you definitely don't.
I
But
love that.
briefly speak to those two audiences.
So, to the people who are currently in it right now, I would say, um, if you are under the illusion that at some point you're going to be able to control this and at some point you're going to be able to stop, like that curtain needs to go up, because if you could control it, you would have stopped by now. Okay. And the illusion that like, when the perfect example, when the new year starts, I'll get it together. When my new job starts, I'll get it together. Once I get past this, I'll get it together. If you are not getting it together now, you are not going to by yourself. The disease of addiction is an isolating, self-centered, fear-based disease, and it will lead you to a place where you are by yourself. And whether you are physically surrounded by other people or not, you are isolating yourself. And the only way to cure that is with other people. And you, at some point, like, you need to address your physical problems first, right? Get it out of you physically, and then you can address everything else that comes with it. There's absolutely nothing bad that comes from trying. Like, trying and not succeeding is like, it's not a failure. It's just like the goal hasn't been completed yet. You're just not there yet. Like, it's not a failure. It's not like I tried and I'm done. Like, whoops, sorry. It's not, you just not there yet. You just haven't finished. And, I have a hard time with the question about like the people who are considering trying it. Because I know that ultimately I am powerless over other people's choices.
Sure.
But I sometimes I get so caught in that too, because I just think like, for me, like a lot of people have this aha moment where they're like, I flushed my drugs and I knew it was time. I did not have that. Like it, and like, I never had that feeling of like, I'm just done. Like when I went down there to Florida, it was to get away. It wasn't to get clean, and like, by the grace of God, I managed to somehow do enough footwork where I found the desire to stay there. Like, and like the rock bottom that like I thought I hit, like it always can go
Oh,
deeper.
that rock bottom. Woo.
Yeah, it'll go as deep as you're willing to dig. Like there is a basement, there is a wine cellar down there. There is a crawl space. Like it'll go as far as you let it. And I had to really dig that up inside. And like there's a saying where I come from where like I might have another run in me, but I don't have another recovery in me, because it takes 1,000 times more effort to get clean than it does to just go pick up the drug. And if you think that you can't get through jails and rehabs, and like if you're not willing to accept your own death, then that is not something that you want to try, because that's where it goes.
Definitely, definitely not. Definitely not. Well, thank you for sharing. Look, I might need you to go get Stephen. We want to meet Stephen. Stephen and Carter.
Let's go get them.
Definitely so. While she's connecting with Stephen and Carter, she can introduce them when they come on screen. But this has been great information to share for our month Good News December 2022. We have so many things going on in this world, and we just needed to take a moment to stop and say, look, give us some good news. Everything else seems to be in a topsy-turvy type of way, coming in our ears, coming in our eyes, speaking out of our mouth. We just had to turn it around and do this particular broadcast with nothing but good news. So we're talking to Sarah, and she's gonna come in with, there's Carter. Hi, Carter.
Portia.
Hi, Stephen.
Hey, how you doing?
This is Carter. He's 3.
Hi, Carter.
This is the child that they said we wouldn't be able to have.
Isn't that amazing? That's so amazing. Listen, I wanted to, if you would just take an opportunity to share together about, let's see, how do I want to put it? Substance abuse, but as a husband and wife. Let me hear Stephen's of some of the things, because you become the support system for men who may have a wife who is, again, a substance abuser. Then again, Sarah can speak to other women who's had that experience. But as a married couple, I think maybe a few months, no, almost a year ago, I had a husband and a wife who was here, who was on the broadcast, and they shared some of what you're sharing. But it was so wonderful to hear, because they still stayed together. So let me hear, just share whatever you want to share.
I mean, excuse me, being 2 people in recovery, has its challenges already, and then 2 people together in recovery also affords challenges. And through all of those challenges, we've come out, I believe, stronger in the end, because, we know what each other, I'm not going to say is going to go through, but could go through, I guess, if that's the right way to put it. And then, we both have different support systems. She has women in her life and I have men in my life, to where we can bounce things off of, the men and the women, and kind of like work together. Now, yes, there at some points, we hit blocks in the road, I guess you could say. But again, we also know how to work through it. Like, we did whatever we could do to get clean. We can do whatever we can do in a marriage, in a relationship, so.
Yeah, and I think it also
so
gives
good.
us like a mutual understanding that's like, there are moments where like, if I cannot handle something and I'm like, I need to go be with my support system, there is never any question. It's like, drop everything and go, like, do what you got to do. And the other thing, which is something that, I don't know, maybe it's unique to our relationship, maybe it's unique to addicts, but one of the like very important things about staying clean is like being able to find some kind of joy in your life. And like, for him, like, he likes to work on cars, right? And like, no matter what that means, which sometimes that's very expensive, and but like, it's okay. Like, he needs that to be okay. So that's his thing. And like, we have formulated our lives around the things that make us happy, so that so that that's possible, because if we don't have that, we're not going to stay clean.
That's the thing. And I'm just so glad that you're doing it together. And let me say this, have there ever been a time that you pretty much thrown that in his face, or he's thrown that back at you, that experience? Because I'm about talking real talk to people, because there are real issues to people. And I thank you so very much for being transparent. But had that ever happened, or is that something that couples working through, that they might kind of like, okay, well, you did this and you did that. How do you work that out?
I don't.
I mean, we've never necessarily thrown a certain situation at one another, but we have had our differences.
Sure.
And
He has never been like, well, you relapsed. Like, I don't know how he's
Love.
to not do that, because I couldn't. I don't know. I've never been in that situation, but when I think about who I am, I don't know that I would have been able to make it through the way that he did, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and for me, it's like, why am I going to throw a situation back in her face? We've already lived it. We're working through it. So to throw it back in their face is just going to make it worse, you know, and possibly take that person back to the situation that I just threw in their face. Well,
True.
you just threw in my face. I'm just going to go right back to it, you know, and
because
now,
that mentality, especially if somebody is struggling, like the disease of addiction will rationalize any way possible to get in there. Like that's a slippery slope. You know, I do have a lot of friends who are addicts, who are married to like normal people, or, you know, and I don't think I would ever choose that over this, because the disease of addiction can be very intrusive, and there is nothing, like, I can tell him anything and he will not judge me. Like, he won't be like, that's sick, or, you know.
I love it. I love the support system. You definitely need that support system. Last but not least, let me ask you this. Again, I know a lot of the spirit of people this time of year, and I'm talking about those that are not, that don't abuse drugs. They have enough to deal with, and they're ready to check out. What do you say to an abuser who may be ready to check out, to commit suicide? It's a hard question, but can you just speak from your heart and give them something to hold on to?
Well, what I always say is, if you haven't given something a full shot, you can't write it off yet. And like, okay, if you do feel that way, and if you do feel like the only way out is to commit suicide, then that option will still be there in 30 days. So give me 30 days. Do what I tell you to do for 30 days, right? And I will be honest with you, like, I've only ever had to pull that out one time, and it was, so, I mean, the person is still alive, right? Like, I think that people do that when they think that there's no other way out, and if you present them with another way out, that can help immensely with how they're feeling. You know.
Well, thank you so much, Stephen. I thank you. Carter, where's Carter? Carter.
Come here, bud.
Come here. Somebody wants to say hi.
Is he coming? Let me. All right. Carter, can you wave to us, please?
Come over here. Come here.
Hey, we get ready. Mom and Dad is getting ready to go. Can you wave to us? All right. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you, Stephen. I really appreciate it. To our audience, tag and share. You would be surprised, the people that you thought were not abusing drugs or even using drugs, they just might be. You don't know. So would you tag? Will you share? Just put it on your page. If not, pray for people. Pray for people. If you see any of these signs, and matter of fact, what might be a sign that someone is using drugs? Do you have an idea? Or can you give us a couple of points? What might be a sign that when they're trying to hide it?
Isolation,
Yeah.
very guilt driven, defensive.
Yeah, definitely isolation. And I think that like sudden anger, like things that are like out of character for them, anything out of character emotionally is definitely a big red flag.
Yeah, and like very defensive.
Not having any money,
Yeah.
you know, that's a big one.
Okay.
Financial.
And
Yep.
see, even though I've never been on drugs, I used it before, but I've never been, addicted to drugs. My heart goes out to individuals because everyone is someone. Everyone is important. Everyone
Yeah.
is important, and I can't stand it when I see people look down their nose at other people. Now that really irks me.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I believe that everyone. What did you say?
We've definitely dealt with that. I just wanted to throw it out there. If it is something that you're struggling with and you are a guy, Stephen is here. If you are a female, I am here. We are tagged on Facebook. Reach out to us. We can help you
Please.
with whatever you need.
That is wonderful. That is wonderful. We'll make sure that information is there, is posted. I'm just grateful. That's okay. Now, what's the dog's name?
Zoe.
Zoe, thank you for the bark. Thank you for the bark. But yes, I am very grateful that you agreed to come and be my guest and share that because, like I say, it's my heart.
Yes.
So to our audience, I'm going to download this video and I'm going to upload it to our YouTube channel. So give me about an hour. You will be able to see Sarah, Stephen, Carter, and Zoe.
Yeah,
Zoe on YouTube. Just plug their name in and you will see them. But this message here, it is so needed and it is necessary to families all over the world.
Yes.
I thank you for tuning in. God bless you. And I'm trying to think, am I going to come on tomorrow, last day? I don't know. But if I don't see you again, Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.